Jocasta and Super Adaptoid have dropped, which means it's time to look ahead to the far future, to the latest data mines, which reveal after next month's zombie season, a very intriguing Spider-Verse season. Starting with Spider-Punk, a 3/2 that has the ability to move, much like cards like Vision and Rocket and Groot, and when it moves to a location, steals 2 power from the highest power card at that location, making it effectively a 3/6. When I look at this card, I think, wow, did old Vulture and Rocket and Groot have a baby? This is a card that I don't know if we've had as a kind of card before, and what I mean by that is we've never had a card that has an inbuilt ability to move that also you are very incentivized to put in a deck that is able to move it beyond just that inbuilt ability. This is like if Nocturne's ability was something that you actively wanted to trigger a bunch of times and that factored into deck building. In other words, this feels like a card that is going to be part of, if it is good enough, and I think it is quite good, a very powerful inbuilt mid-range core. It should not be lost on anyone that right now the card Ghost Spider at 1/3 is already being played in mid-range decks, and I think you could very easily put together a fairly dominant and powerful baseline mid-range core based on this card having a floor of 3/6 and a ceiling of like 3/14 or something like that. That's just something you're very interested in doing. Now, there are downsides to this card. If you draw it on the final turn of the game, it is absolutely terrible and totally unplayable. You are very unlikely to get value out of this card if you're not getting value also out of its free move. Keep in mind that if you draw this late, it's effectively like drawing Old Vulture, except it gains less points and gets shut down by Luke Cage. Now, the counter argument of this is actually also worth talking about, and the counter argument to a card like this being good is largely what I just said. Luke Cage exists. We have, of course, Mercury to deal with stuff like this, and the ability to reset steals and gain powers with cards like Shadow King. So it's not a guarantee that a deck like this will immediately come out and be dominant, but I do think you'll see a decent amount of it, enough to force the metagame to adapt and to perhaps run those counters. Another worry for a deck like this would be Scream, although I think it potentially likely that it A, goes in Scream decks, and B, also Scream doesn't want to see Luke Cage, so there is that as well. All in all, this looks to me like a space that they haven't really invested in before. It's like if Nocturne also pushed you to move it again and again and again and again and again. And I think whether or not we're going to be able to invest in that in a small way, or if this is going to be competing with the now Human Torch and move decks, remains to be seen. I don't necessarily think that that those decks can afford Human Torch to not be in them, basically. And I kind of don't know if you wouldn't rather have Human Torch in whatever deck you're making that facilitates this. But I do wonder if there's some sort of mid-rangey Human Torch and this, but not fully dedicated to move thing, in much the same way as the current Madam Web Human Torch and Think First Steps list. I think that kind of space is really interesting for this to be in, because it's not going to be the best on-curve 3-drop, I think. It's going to be pretty close to it, and it's not going to be the best, definitely not going to be the best, in terms of 3-cost follow-up and move payoff. So how much of its power is going to be, it's a very good mid-range 3-drop, a la Rocket and Groot original form, and how much of its power is going to be, it is going to be a 3-drop that can compound its own power by investing into it. My instinct is that it results in a pseudo-move package in the mid-range decks, rather than being a replacement for how move functions with Human Torch currently. Superior Spider-Man, which for those who are unaware is when Otto Octavius, Doc Ock, took over Peter's body and was Spider-Man for a significant period of time, calling himself the Superior Spider-Man. This is that character, and what it's doing is actually kind of interesting because I don't know exactly how it's related to that flavor. It just feels like this is a card that is doing something, and that is, if you have a card that has increased power, this card is giving you +1 energy at a 3/4 rate. And I think that's probably just a really strong card. There are so many mid-range decks that key off of power. All of those mid-range decks would love to free roll extra energy. And while this isn't the easiest thing to make happen, every single one of those decks can make it happen fairly easily. This can really compound, say, let's say you're doing Hope Summers and Kitty Pryde. This card will see the Kitty Pryde. This card will give you the extra energy. What I am confused by is why it's worded the way it is. I think it might be so it works with temporary buffs at the end of one turn, but it is odd to me that it's not checking at the start of the turn for some reason. Like, for some reason, it makes sense to me that this would be like, start of turn, check that, but instead it's end of turn, which of course adds another hook. Maybe that's why, so that you are able to hook into the Invisible Woman deck. And Lord knows that deck is all about some green power with Havoc and Thena. I mean, a great example of where this works is it fully offsets a Havoc, right? Just 100% offsets at least one turn of a Havoc. That's pretty nice. You can't complain about that. Like, you get to be able to say on turn 5, play this and Havoc. There you go. You suddenly have your 6 energy on the final turn of the game. Ideally, you'll be able to do more than that, right? Like a turn 2 Thena, eventually get this guy down. That kind of stuff makes sense. Maybe we get Fantasticar back into the deck. We have seen some decent ability for that deck to use extra energy when it happens. I think it's a strong deck to have extra energy with, and I think this card strikes me as like a sort of Hope Summers-ish card, where Hope Summers, when she released, was a very powerful card, and I think now has sort of dropped into like what you'd call like a 4-star card rather than a 5-star card. And I think this card is somewhere in that range, but I think people will be surprised by how easy it will be to make this card just be on permanently. I had to look this guy up. For those unfamiliar with Ezekiel Sims, he is famous from being in the movie Madam Web and famously studying spiders in the Amazon with one of the characters' mother before that she died. I believe that's the exact wording. Now, Ezekiel Sims in Marvel Snap is a very interesting Silk alternative. Whenever you play a card with higher power than this, he gets +2 power and moves to a different location, which means that he is much more in your control than something like Silk is, and has the effect of being able to do a similarly powerful Kraven stacking game if you're willing to, as Silk demands, play off of where he is. To me, this strikes me as a strict upgrade. I don't know if it's going to be a factual strict upgrade, but I'll take anything over playing Silk. Anyone who remembers all of the videos I've ever done about anything involving a Silk deck can tell you how much I hate the card. Where Silk actually has upside over this is with something like Hydra Stomper, where you just care about the raw volume of moves deeply, and I think that could negatively impact this guy, but I am generally interested in not playing the card that absolutely owns me if my opponent is. I don't want to give my opponent control over where my power is at any point in the game, let alone from turn 2 onward. I think this guy is going to be a noticeable upgrade there, and I will be very sad if he isn't. But I also don't know exactly how much more he's going to do. I think he'll be good, but I don't necessarily envision him getting that far above 6 or 8, right? And so you'll have to weigh the extra power you get over a Silk and the fact that you can play Silk on the final turns of the game and have it be better than this guy versus this. I know it's sort of insulting to call something a Silk side grade, and to be clear, I do think he's a little bit better than that, but that is the competition that he faces. Now, obviously, he's not overtaking Sam Wilson as the premier Batroc and Kraven guy anytime soon. Prowler, a 3/4 with the ability to add 2 Thieves tools to your hand. If a card moved last turn, set them to 0. I would expect that this card is basically only going in decks where that is a trivial cost via Sam Wilson, via the card we just saw, Ezekiel Sims, via Silk, whatever it is, trivial cost for that to happen. Maybe even your opponent's card's moving, who can say? And what he's going to do is Kate Bishop the crap out of you. Let's take a look at what the Prowler's Thieves tools are. Remote Mines, effectively a 1/4 that afflicts. It will end up afflicting the 2 highest power cards here that belong to your enemy with -2 power. So effectively, that's a little bit of a better Flames of the Faultine. It's going to be free. You're going to be happy about that as soon as something moves. Flight Harness redistributes some of your power. Your highest power card moves to the right and gains +1 power. I'm not sure I love this, but as someone who does play a decent amount of Ghost Spider in his mid-range deck, I think this is probably going to win you several games where you're willing to use it. The will they, won't they aspect of this one is, I think, particularly dangerous, where this is a card that you could have randomly generated and they might have to play around, and that is the kind of thing that really catches someone out, having to play around a big body being in 2 locations instead of just the location where it is. So I think this is, on the whole, probably going to be the least useful over the average game, but in high leverage spots will probably win a lot of 8 and 4 cubers. This one, probably the most generically useful. It gives something to power and gives you extra energy. You're never going to be sad to see this one. It's the, like, acid arrow, if we're doing a Kate Bishop comp. It's just good. This is, like, your omniversal presence from a Merlin. Card's just good. It's going to do good stuff. You're going to be happy about it, especially if it's free. There's really just a bunch of incremental value stuffed into the Prowler package here, and I would imagine that he ends up in a similar spot to Kate Bishop, but what could keep him from doing that is higher level of competition. At 2-3, Kate Bishop has close to a premium stat line for her cost. At 3-4, Prowler is quite far off of a premium stat line at his. And I do think that if you are going to feel the pain of that anywhere, it is going to be there. But I will say I do think these spells are, on the whole, largely better than Kate Bishop arrows because they don't take up board space and because they are going to be easy to play even if you aren't getting stuff to move. Discounting them to 0 is honestly just amazing. I think this card is going to be good. Spider-Man Noir, interestingly, will represent the second character played by the great Nicolas Cage in Marvel Snap. Of course, the first being Ghost Rider Johnny Blaze, but it actually just occurred to me, why is Johnny Blaze, whatever, Johnny Blaze should be what Human Torch's name, whatever. The point is, I don't see it with this card. This is some of the weirdest text they've ever put on a card. It is a Nick Cagean piece of text here, where, is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. With Nick Cage, I tend to come down on the side that Nick Cage is actually very good, but I know there's a large debate about it. If you doubt me, I think you should go watch Pig. But this, I have absolutely no idea. So, on reveal, if your other cards in play cost exactly 8, it takes the card off the top of your deck, puts it in the board, and gives it 8 power. If you make this happen, it's very good. I don't know how you set it up at 4-4. Now, things to keep in mind, tokens have energy costs, so Mysterio will be 6, right? Like, if you want to play your Mysterio early for whatever godforsaken reason, it will get you to 6. But it's like, okay, how do we get this to be 8 on curve? It's like 1 Mr. Sinister and a 3. That's how we can get it to be 8 on curve. Maybe Thanos can manipulate it around such that it is 8 on curve. Because, like, when it does happen, I would imagine that, like, this is a good thing to do. But what I will say beyond that is if you zoom out a little bit and you look at, like, the cards this card compares to, Jubilee, for example, would be infinitely worse if it capped its own output. It would be way worse if it did that. And so this card is actually just a really confusing 412. Like, that's what's actually going on here. This is a 412 if you want to be really confusing about it. That's what it is. And I don't know that that's the, like, enough of a deck building thing that, like, it's asking so much of you that I don't think that's worth it, right? And when I look at it, it's like, okay, I would love to play 412, draw a card, right? Like, that would be awesome. And that's what the upside on this represents. But the ask is so high, and that's all it is. And I don't think I'd go out of my way this far for that. But this is definitely the card that I feel like I have the largest error bars on. Just, I think it's weird to make a Jubilee adjacent card that also doesn't have Jubilee upside. Like, the upside is capped with this guy. All of that is to say, though, if you zoom out and look at all the 4s and the 8s, it's a very cool spider joke. I do think that's nice. but I don't know exactly how I'm supposed to make this guy work. And I am willing to buy that if there's like one really consistent way to make that happen, that this is something worth doing. But I can't find a way to make that happen that doesn't feel like going way too far out of my way for this. I'm not Spider-Man, I'm Man Spider. This is a 5/1. Merge the last card you played into this. When it merges, double its power. There are definitely going to be some dumb things you can do with this. Like, you will almost certainly be able to make very, very large men. Here's an interesting point. If there's an agony on the lane, somehow, I kind of think what'll happen is the agony will merge after this. Like, I want to know what happens if you go, like, agony into this. Does it merge once? I think it merges once. But if it merges twice, that's a double-double, and it's pretty cool. Either way, the point is, this guy is like a Black Panther Arnim Zola type thing, I think. Like, there's maybe something cool you can do with, like, a Penny Parker type of thing, because you can go 2 into 3 Penny Parker into this, right? Like, you have the 2 into 3 Penny Parker into Spider, go to 5 energy, play this on that lane, get the extra energy, very large guy. I don't know if that's good. I gotta be honest, I sort of doubt that anything that's just like, I've made one large man is all that good. But they did just nerf Shang-Chi, but you still have plenty of other things to worry about. This feels like a sort of like Panther Zola-y type card where it's just doing something really stupid. And if you don't have the answers to whatever really stupid thing it's doing, you're probably going to die. But also, there are going to be so many decks that just sort of naturally have the answers to whatever stupid thing that's happening. You're probably going to be okay, right? Like, so that's the kind of card this guy that I envision this being. Like a sort of, 48% win rate combo card that when it wins absolutely for free. When it loses because someone disrupted its combo on the final turn, which usually gives it like a pretty awkward cube win rate percentage. I like the idea of the Penny Parker stuff. I don't really buy it, but I am, I guess, interested in what this card says. Hydro Man. On reveal, set the cost of each card on top of your and your opponent's decks to 1. So, at 5/8, this is pretty clearly a Sandman riff, and also pretty clearly a Mobius card, which means I think what you're going to see is this is going to go in, like, Pixie decks. And so, like, Pixie decks are going to play this and be like, I'm cheating even harder, let's go! I think this is, like, almost a good card. If this was, like, a year ago, I would be playing this card probably. I would be doing, like, Hydro Man and Mobius and stuff like that. And I think that would be like a pretty good thing to be doing. In the current age, it feels a little one note because Mobius is so good right now and so omnipresent and so powerful. So, I mean, really, this card is sort of deterministic on that. But largely, when you run into decks that are built around stuff like this, like Pixie, or basically every deck that dies to Mobius that isn't like Mr. Negative, if there's enough of a reason for people to play Mobius, you just end up in awkward positions because you're doing less points than the other decks that die to Mobius, and you end up having a worse game plan generally than them, and you both still die to Mobius. I think if you want to talk about like Warlock, for example, that's a great way in which like Warlock describes that almost exactly, right? And so I think that this is a card that luckily does have a good stat line on its own. Like 5/8 really isn't bad. We've seen other 5/8s be very relevant, cards like Hellion, and I can understand like this card can be like really strong, and I think it's like pretty close to being good. I'd be a little surprised if it was a consistent metagame player, but I could totally see it showing up in some of those Pixie lists. Chameleon. On reveal, copy the text of another card you revealed here this turn. Okay, so I think a lot of people are going to look at this and be like, this card is just, it has to be strong, right? Like, it's a 3/3 that has that text. That's so much better. Like, here's the problem. This turn and here, those restrictions are strong. Those are big restrictions. You can split, like, Darkhawk Mystique over multiple turns, and you can split Darkhawk Mystique over multiple lanes. What you can't do is that with this. And I think people are going to be like, oh, I'm going to do double Silver Surfer. Is that even good anymore? Like, being realistic, we have so many other awesome ways of boosting cards that I'm just not sure that's good anymore. Where I do see this card potentially excelling is in the sort of like splat style, like let's double up on all my discounts and with ongoing cards, or with like tribunal or something like that, right? Like that kind of stuff, I can see it being relevant in, but I don't know if I'm confident enough in that happening or in those decks being good enough to maintain a space at the top of the metagame for long enough for it to matter. Because I think this stuff can be really good. It's just also quite easily disrupted. And so I don't really mind it being good there. And I can't really see it being good anywhere else because of how stringent the restrictions on here and this turn are. Web Sling is interesting because I think having the ability to move is awesome. So this card's saying next turn you can move one of your cards out of here. That's awesome. But right now we effectively get that utility out of like a Ghost Spider already. It comes off of one of Prowler's tools. And I'm assuming this is a card that we're like supposed to get, like one of those, like an Astral Projection type card. And I think Astral Projection's a pretty good like comparison for this in the sense that it's not very good and you're not going to play it a lot. I just don't think the rate is here for this. Maybe if it got some extra power, I don't know. I think that like 1 energy, 0 power. I think that right now I could play a Ghost Spider and get 3 power out of that equation. And I don't want to do this. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. I've been KMBest. You've been phenomenal. And I will see you in the next one. Let me know in the comments what you thought about the upcoming Spider season. I believe it is in November, is my understanding, because next season is going to be zombies. Keep your eyes out for a full zombie review set to drop before that group of cards starts coming out. I, as always, have been KMBest, like I just said, except when I mess up and confuse myself with Lambie series. I will see you in the next one.